I recently made a video about why I chose to stay on Unreal 4 while developing my indie game, Project Feline, and have put little thought into keeping my software up to date. And for whatever reason, that video got a lot of attention and sparked a lot of discussion. Many commenters were quick to share their grievances with Unreal 5's increasing system requirements and diminishing performance in pursuit of fidelity, while praising my choice to stick with an older version of Unreal. But I think a lot of people came away with the conclusion that Project Feline will be a great game purely on the virtue of it being built with older software. But I disagree. Just as a game isn't automatically good because it uses a newer engine, neither is it good because it uses an older one. There's a lot more to it than that. I've often noticed online discussion of game development tends to pivot around these technical things, arguing over what game engine is the best or what programming language is superior. I feel that people at times can get so attached to their tools that they allow the tool to subsume their entire identity. When people do this, I strongly feel they're missing the forest for the trees. And I feel the attention garnered by this topic is symptomatic of a much deeper problem plaguing all creative industries today. If you think about it, why would you place so much faith in your tool in the first place? Maybe it's because you have no faith in yourself, and that's a pretty serious problem. As I've been working on my own game, Project Feline, which you can wishlist on Steam right now, I've come to learn that the tool matters considerably less than the individual using it and the artistic intent of that person. I strongly feel the intent needs to be focused on more, because whenever I see people get into arguments over tools, I found that they have put so much thought into the tool, but not what it is they actually want to build with it and why. Knowing your intentions isn't straightforward either, but it's so foundationally important. I've seen a lot of developers, no matter what engine they were using, whether it was Unity or Unreal or Godot, suffer from this problem, including myself. For instance, I started Project Feline with the intention of making a game that I would like, to recapture a sense of childhood nostalgia. And while well-intentioned, I found that that alone is insufficient. I knew I liked certain mechanics and aesthetics, but I didn't know why, and this created a lot of ambiguity when prototyping. And without a sense of cohesion, without knowing how things are supposed to go together, it makes it very difficult to make something that appeals to more people than just you. Because if all you see in the games you liked growing up is nostalgia, and if capturing that is your only intent, then there isn't a reason not to combine everything you found nostalgic into one project, even if it doesn't fit. I escaped that hell by learning to exercise restraint. Not just adding stuff because I thought it was cool, but really asking myself, why would this be cool? Are you just charmed by a new feature, or does this actually solve a problem and contribute to the overall attitude of the piece? Well, how do I know what's the right thing? Other people have to tell me. I gotta show this and get feedback so that other people can tell me what's good. And that's a bit of a trap as well, because other people are gonna be attracted to your thing for completely different reasons than you. I think they're a good judge of the stuff that you choose to put in, and they can judge how well implemented it is from the distance, but they don't necessarily know the inner workings and mechanics of why things work. In fairness, it's not really their job to know, and if it was executed well and cohesively, they probably wouldn't notice. So if you can't rely on others to solve it for you, how do you figure it out? And I don't know. I don't know what'll work for you, but I can tell you what I've been doing that's been working for me. When I figured this out for myself, I stopped caring so much about my software and my tools, and began making much higher quality progress towards executing my vision for the game. So when I'm sitting here working, there'll be one part of my brain that's focused on the task at hand and getting through it, but there'll be another part of my brain that's analyzing what I'm doing and asking questions. Am I satisfied with what I've just done? Is it good? Does it hold up? What's the goal with this choice? What impression am I hoping to leave? This has very much been the case in the visual parts of the game. I've picked a very demanding 3D anime art style for Project Feline, and I'll ask myself, why this style? I'm by no means a hardcore anime fan, but I recall every morning before school when I was about 10 years old, I'd always watch this one specific TV channel that would air these different cartoons and shows from all over the world, and the ones that caught my attention the most were the ones with this anime art style, and just the character designs and the way that the characters moved really caught my attention. I wonder what it was that made me so drawn to this as a child over something like Peppa Pig, and why I still admire it all this time later. I ask myself similar questions about things like game mechanics as well. I've noticed there are certain mechanics and dynamics I'm really drawn to. Sometimes I'll see two games with the same mechanic that are implemented very differently, and I'll tend to have a preference over which one I prefer. What is it that makes me prefer one over the other? So I pay close attention to the things I like, whether those are video games or movies or albums or books or what have you, and with the things I keep the longest that I cherish the most, I start to see them as more than just media, and they become, as I like to call them, artifacts of attitude. That is to say that a lot of the things I cherish have attitudes in common, imbued in the fabric of the work. The attitude imbued in a game or an album or a book isn't readily apparent from a first watch, but it becomes more and more apparent over time, and you have to spend quality time with the thing and cultivate, a relationship with it like you would with a person. In a way, that is indirectly what you're doing, because more often than not, that piece of media was made by a person. This bond isn't measurable in a quarterly report. There's no metric of it to track in an analytics dashboard, and it's not something you can get a read on from the day one review score. It's the way the thing patinas with you over time. It's really invisible, but when you spend enough time with a thing, you begin to notice the invisible. You begin to recognize the attitude with which the thing was made. And I found, for me at least, more often than not, that very attitude is what drew me to the thing in the first place without me realizing. The attitudes become easier to notice when I start picking the work apart and analyzing how it was made. So as I've been working on the game, especially with the graphics, trying to achieve this certain anime art style, I start researching how anime is made. And then I start learning about the key animators, the in-betweeners, the colorists, the background artists, and everything. When I start looking more thoroughly, I start to notice patterns and recognize that for something in anime to look good, it has to be done in a particular deliberate way. Whether that be paying close attention to the colors of a scene, or the way the color of skin reddens in shadow, the way your eye is drawn across the screen when a certain pose is struck, or what have you. And I ask myself, what is it about those things that I like? When I phrase it like that and answer these questions, I realize why I love this style. It's not because of how it looks necessarily, but rather how the attitude that had to go into it. Paying attention to details, deliberately choosing the key poses, every color, every line to give a particular impression. How that attitude and playing that game gave you this outcome. When I look at Gabi now, I don't just see a character, because now I've spent a lot of time working on her. What I see is like a living relic of attitudes that I want to pass on. I've worked to imbue these attitudes not just in her design, but also in the way she moves. So you'll notice now that the mechanics I've chosen to keep are a lot more fluent and cohesive, and her animation's more acrobatic. I animated her this way by studying gymnasts, and I chose to study gymnasts because in the craft of gymnastics, I recognize a similar attitude, that in order to pull off moves like this, it requires total, consistent, long-term commitment to the pursuit of controlling oneself, and to employ that self-control not just to move from point A to B, and not necessarily to do it quickly, but to do it thoroughly and gracefully. That's an attitude I admire, and it's also the one I notice in the production of anime. Doing something intentionally and deliberately, whether inking the perfect sketch with your hands or contorting your posture at the precise right time to execute the perfect corkscrew flip, both of which require extreme self-control. A lot of the video games I played growing up reward this same behavior. I invested a lot of my childhood mastering particular characters, playing the same game over and over and over again until I completely finished it, completely mastered it, and got the exact result I wanted. And again, it's this same attitude I notice. When I zoom out and look at all of those things in totality, it tells me a lot about who I am and the sorts of things I ought to be making. And I believe knowing yourself that well is such an important thing when you're a creative person. I think it matters way more than arguing over what game engine to use. All of these things that I'm drawn to were all made in all different software. I didn't like a certain album because it was made in Reason 7. I don't like a certain book because it was typeset in Adobe InDesign. Nor did I like a certain game because it was made in Unreal. It doesn't really matter to me because you can create trash or treasure with these tools. But true treasure is hidden. You aren't going to find it out there shopping for tools. You're going to find it buried inside something you already have. And when I began to recognize it, the treasure that lay beneath the nostalgia, beneath the tools it was made with, I discovered the true sum of its parts, the enduring attitudes and merits with which it was made. It's these very merits and attitudes that have possessed me to work on Project Feline in the manner that I have, and it's my hope that if I do a good enough job throughout the rest of development, these same merits and attitudes might live on through my game to reach the next person. I think that's what it's all about, not the tool, but you and your attitude. So long as you know what you're making and why, and you recognize what attitude you ought to adopt and pass forward, you can get the job done with any tool and the audience won't care what you made it with. So if you're a bit like me, aspiring to create someone else's treasure, and you're struggling to know what it is you're actually trying to make, and you're getting caught up on trying to pick a tool, I would encourage you to do as I've tried to do, and just withdraw from these online arguments, pick the tools you're comfortable with, sit alone with the media that you cherish, and analyze why you like it. Don't just consume the product, ask questions, and the answers will find you. You know, you'd be surprised the amount of value you can squeeze out from a few good things rather than a lot of average things. And I hope that one day, my thing might be one of those good things for you to enjoy. So that's all I had to say. There's a lot more to this whole game dev thing than just coding and picking the right engine. And I hope I've been able to articulate some of what that invisible work is through these devlogs. I am sorry for the lack of activity, by the way. I've just been kind of busy working on the game, and there's still about a year's worth of progress I haven't publicly documented, but I am working to fix that. I've got a few episodes in the works right now, covering some of the stuff you've seen in this footage, so I really appreciate your patience. If you want to collect some artifacts of attitude for yourself and support me in the process, wishlist Project Feline and check out the merch. And thanks to my members and patrons for funding these videos. Make a pledge and get early access to new devlogs, more frequent behind-the-scenes updates on what I'm doing, your name in the devlog credits, and exclusive merch designs. Alright gamers, I'm gonna get back to it, and I'll see you next time.